Nothing this court can do will bring back my brother.
My dad was the greatest, most wonderful, best ever, should have won a trophy dad.
Right. I know you did this.
I did not.
And I can understand the why behind it.
No, there is no why, because I didn't do it.
They promised to nurture, but behind those calm faces, these female killers lurked unspeakable evil. From Nikki Cappello's lethal betrayal of her husband to Holli Osborn's dreadful matricide murder, their courtroom reactions will haunt you. Let's begin.
Marjorie Nikki Cappello is charged with intentional murder. Prosecutors say they believe she poisoned her husband, Jim Cappello, with insulin at their South Huntsville home.
A nurse, a wife, a mother, but also a killer. This is the case of Nikki Cappello, the woman who poisoned her husband with insulin and almost walked free. In September 2018, Huntsville, Alabama was shaken when Jim Cappello, a well-known private investigator, suddenly vanished. Friends and family grew worried when he stopped answering calls. He was a devoted father and not the type to disappear. His wife, Nikki Cappello, seemed calm. Too calm. When officers began looking into Jim's disappearance, questions quickly turned toward Nikki. Behind her quiet demeanor, there were disturbing signs. Investigators discovered that Jim hadn't simply gone missing. He'd been poisoned with insulin, a deadly dose delivered by the woman he trusted most. The truth came out, and it was devastating. Jim's body was found, the poison was confirmed, and Nikki's lies unraveled. She was arrested and charged with murder. Court documents painted a chilling picture. A registered nurse, trained to heal, had used her medical knowledge to kill. Why? Prosecutors said greed, resentment, and a need for control were at the heart of Nikki's actions. Jim was the breadwinner, well respected in the community, and Nikki wanted her own way out. Instead of divorce, she chose something darker.
When I look at her, there's nothing there. Every time anybody's talking to her or about her, everybody in the courtroom is getting emotional, thinking about children, thinking about death, and she's a blank slate, just completely cold, like there's not a human inside.
In court, the evidence was overwhelming. The jury found her guilty. The judge handed down the maximum penalty, life in prison. No parole, no second chances. However, she showed no regret for her actions. Jim's sister, Jamie Wiest, was granted custody of the couple's young daughter, Riley. She promised to give the little girl the love and stability her father would have wanted. Jim's family was heartbroken but determined. His family remembered the day they found Jim's body. His father said,
"Will there ever be complete closure? I mean, one part of it is over. The other, you gotta heal from that."
A devoted husband lost to betrayal, and the woman who ended his life shows no regret. Our next case reveals how a daughter concealed the crime in plain sight, burying her mother in the backyard.
My mother, I want her home.
I want her home too.
I want to go home right now and see her standing in the living room.
A missing woman. A daughter's story is full of lies, and a backyard hiding the truth all along. When the jury heard what really happened to 79-year-old Ora Hawkins, the courtroom fell silent, because the person responsible wasn't a stranger. It was her daughter, Amy Day. In September 2015, 46-year-old Amy Day reported her mother, Ora Leigh Hawkins, missing. She told relatives her mom had moved to Colorado with a friend from church, but detectives noticed something strange. Amy's story kept changing. The Osceola County Sheriff's Office started to dig deeper. They checked phone calls, bank records, and Amy's movements. Soon, troubling details surfaced. Financial documents showed a $2,500 check written from Hawkins to Amy just days before she disappeared. Red flags were everywhere, but she denied every time. 2 days later, investigators searched the backyard of the home Amy shared with her mother. Buried under garbage bags, a pink blanket, rope, and cable wires, they found the body of Ora Hawkins. The shocking truth shattered the family. Ora never left for Colorado. She never left her home at all. Her life was taken by the very person who should have protected her. Detectives pointed to financial gain. Amy had been relying on her mother's money, but it wasn't enough. Investigators believed she killed her for greed, then tried to hide it. Her sister also said at her last phone call,
Very, very upset. She was crying uncontrollably.
Amy Day was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In 2018, after years of waiting, a jury found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. However, she chose to remain silent as the verdict was read. The family of Ora Hawkins released a heartbreaking statement.
It is beyond belief that her life was cut short through the callous actions of a relative, her daughter, my sister Amy Day.
A mother's life was stolen by the very child she brought into this world. Our next case shows how a husband is shot in his own home, and the killer disappears across continents to escape justice.
You put the gun 12 to 24 inches from his head and pulled the trigger, correct?
Probably.
A husband was shot inside his home, a wife who vanished across borders to escape justice, and a family that waited more than a decade for answers. For more than a decade, his family waited until the day she was finally brought back to face them in court. In March 2007, Newton Falls, Ohio, Air Force Major Carl Herrig was found dead inside his home. He'd been shot 3 times and then covered with a tarp. The killer was his wife, Claudia Herrig. But instead of staying, Claudia emptied a bank account, drove straight to the airport, and boarded a plane. By the time police put the pieces together, she was gone. She had fled to Brazil, the country of her birth, where she believed American law could never touch her. Detectives quickly confirmed what had happened. Carl had been planning to leave Claudia because the marriage was falling apart. Friends and family said he had made up his mind, and she knew it. The evidence inside the home, along with the sudden escape, pointed directly at Claudia. But the problem? Brazil refused to send back its own citizens, even for murder charges. And so began a legal fight that dragged on for almost 11 years. Investigators eventually uncovered a crucial detail. Claudia had renounced her Brazilian citizenship in 1999 when she became an American. That loophole opened the door for extradition. After lengthy negotiations between the U.S. and Brazilian governments, a deal was struck. Claudia would be returned to Ohio, but only under the condition that her sentence not exceed Brazil's maximum of 30 years. She was finally brought back to face trial. Prosecutors revealed the motive clearly. Carl was leaving her. The marriage was broken, and she would not accept that rejection. Out of anger and desperation, Claudia picked up a gun and ended his life. During the trial, she herself claimed that,
when I put that gun to my head, I didn't really think at that moment I was going to pull that trigger. I wanted his attention.
In 2019, Claudia Herrig stood before the court. She was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole only after 28 years. However, she remained motionless while the verdict was read. The prosecutor called it justice. Not perfect, but justice. At last, Carl's family had seen her held accountable, but in the courtroom, the pain was overwhelming. Carl's niece said,
Claudia is a manipulator and a vindictive liar. She has no remorse, no shame, no morals. She is evil.
A decade-long hunt for a wife who fled after the killing ends in court. But our next case takes horror to the next level and proves that a single moment of rage can destroy a life.
I myself underestimated my grandmother's impact on the city and on folks, so it's an unspeakable tragedy.
A beloved grandmother, a rising singer, a teacher with a future ahead. And in the courtroom, you'll see exactly how one random push on a street would become a crime that shook New York City. On March 10, 2022, 87-year-old vocal coach Barbara Gustern was walking in Chelsea, Manhattan. She was full of life, loved by her students and adored by her family. But that night, her path crossed with 28-year-old Laura Pazienza, a former event planner preparing for her upcoming wedding. What followed was a shocking act of atrocity no one could have expected. Lauren was drunk and furious after being kicked out of a park with her fiancé. She hurled her food at him, stormed off, and in her anger, shoved Barbara Gustern to the ground. The petite grandmother struck her head on the pavement and never recovered from her injuries. Instead of helping, Lauren walked away, calm, cold, as if nothing had happened. Surveillance cameras quickly captured Lauren leaving the scene. Witnesses described her shove as deliberate and aggressive. When police began to investigate, they discovered inconsistencies in Lauren's story. She denied calling Barbara a name before the attack, and later even told probation officers she had only bumped into the victim. But the evidence told a different story, and soon, Lauren was facing charges of manslaughter. In court, Lauren pleaded guilty, but her words wavered. She tried to convince the jury, "I never meant to push intentionally," yet no one was convinced. Barbara's grandson sat in silence, heartbroken, To him, the apology felt hollow. Outside the courtroom, he said,
She took away my best friend, my mentor, and a teacher to thousands of people in this city.
There was no financial motive, no long-standing feud, just a burst of rage and alcohol-fueled anger on an ordinary night. A tragic example of how a single moment can destroy two families forever. Lauren Pazienza was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. However, she remained motionless. The judge added 6 extra months, condemning her inability to fully accept responsibility for her actions. In the end, Barbara's family left the court without the grandmother they loved so deeply.
I think the judge's decision was actually unexpected, but I think it's right.
A grandmother lost on the streets of New York. But our next case pushes betrayal even darker, where a husband drifts off to sleep beside the woman he trusts most and never wakes again.
She armed herself with one of the handguns. She aimed it and shot Dr. Osborn 3 times in the head.
A husband asleep in his bed. A wife with a deadly secret. And the truth that came out in court would leave everyone speechless. It was July 18th, 2018 in Dublin, Ohio. Dr. Christopher Osborn, a 50-year-old doctor, was found dead in his bed. He had been shot 3 times in the head. The person behind this horrifying act, his wife, Holli Osborn, is a 46-year-old nurse. Holli was arrested nearly a year after the murder. Evidence tied her directly to the crime. The couple had a life together, or so it seemed, but behind closed doors. Prosecutors later revealed Holli was angry at her husband for infidelity and was fueled by jealousy. Their home, once a place of trust, became the scene of a senseless and deadly crime. Investigators found her DNA on the gun and gunshot residue on her body. Authorities had a clear case, despite defense claims that she was intoxicated and that evidence was mishandled. The court allowed it. Holli initially went home on house arrest after posting bond, but the legal process continued. During the trial, prosecutors described the night of the murder in chilling detail. She walked up to a sleeping man, pointed the muzzle just inches from his head, and shot him in the face. Senior Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Daniel Leonard told the court. The defense argued there was no tangible proof and tried to question the investigators' work, but the jury didn't buy it. Prosecutors painted a picture of jealousy, alcohol issues, and frustration over her husband's affairs. For Holli, anger turned deadly. The murder wasn't random. It was planned, personal, and devastating.
She's familiar with guns. The guns contain only her DNA, no one else's. She has GSR all over her body.
In October 2023, a jury found Holli Osborn guilty of murder. However, she showed no remorse at the time of sentencing. Judge Jaiza Page sentenced her to 18 years to life in prison. Her appeal is pending, but for now she remains behind bars, unable to undo the tragedy she caused. The courtroom was heavy with grief. Christopher's family spoke through tears. Next up, a wife who played the victim. Jennifer Faith wasn't seeking justice. She was covering up her own deadly plot.
I turned around and I just saw this person shoot and
After her husband's murder, neighbors saw Jennifer Faith in tears, never realizing their kindness was bankrolling the plot to kill Jamie. On a crisp October morning in Dallas, Texas, what began as a peaceful walk for Jamie Faith and his wife Jennifer turned into a nightmare. Out of nowhere, a masked gunman ambushed them, firing 7 shots into Jamie. Within moments, the loving husband and father was gone. As soon as the incident happened, Jennifer said,
"It's been horrible, devastating. I teeter between completely heartbroken and completely devastated every day. It's been awful."
Neighbors and friends rallied around Jennifer, wanting to help her through what they believed was unimaginable grief. A GoFundMe page was set up to support her and her daughter, raising more than $60,000 in donations. People gave generously, believing their money was going toward funeral costs, living expenses, and helping the grieving family heal. What no one knew was that behind Jennifer's devastated facade lay a chilling secret, one that would shatter the trust of everyone who cared for her. As detectives began piecing together the puzzle, they discovered that the masked gunman was not a stranger at all. He was Darren Lopez, Jennifer's high school sweetheart. The two had reconnected during the pandemic and started what Jennifer described as an emotional affair. During the interrogation, she insisted she had no connection to Lopez, but the investigators weren't buying it. Leaning in, voices rising. They cut her off and barked.
You had over 24,000 text messages called. 24,000.
It was then they learned that Jennifer had been showering Lopez with expensive gifts after Jamie's death, not with her own money, but with donations intended to support her family. The investigation revealed that Jennifer used the GoFundMe funds to buy Lopez a large Samsung television, pay for his airline tickets, and even give him access to credit cards in her name. Detectives uncovered hundreds of text messages between the two, painting a picture of manipulation and planning. Evidence suggested that Jennifer had encouraged Lopez to kill Jamie, convincing him that Jamie mistreated her, and a claim for which police found no supporting evidence. In early 2021, Jennifer was arrested and charged with orchestrating her husband's murder. Prosecutors argued that her motive was a mix of rekindled romance, financial gain, and a desire to start a new life with Lopez. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jennifer pleaded guilty to murder for hire in February 2023. She was sentenced to life in prison, while Lopez is awaiting trial for his role in the killing. As the verdict was read, she got emotional as she wiped away her tears. A husband gone, with only a hint of remorse from the woman who planned it. But our next case unravels a courtroom with a web of lies, a love story turned nightmare that tore a family apart for over a decade.
She was convicted of first-degree murder at her third trial.
In 2010, a Massachusetts love story ended in a crime so brutal it would take 4 trials, 2 hung juries, and more than a decade to reach the truth. At the center, Cara Rintala is accused of strangling her wife, Anna Marie Cochran. What followed was a courtroom saga filled with heartbreak, shocking testimony, and one final sentence that split a family in two. On a March day in 2010, 37-year-old Anna Marie Cochran was found dead, the victim of strangulation. Her wife, Cara Rintala, was at the center of suspicion from the start. But what seemed at first like a straightforward case turned into one of the most drawn-out and emotionally draining legal battles the community had ever seen. The investigation pointed toward Cara. Prosecutors believed that an argument had escalated into deadly conflict, but proving that in court was far from simple. Prosecutors argued, saying,
Anne Marie's body is covered in white paint. And the inference the Commonwealth's going to want you to draw is that that was to cover up trace evidence. Why does Cara Rintala need to cover up trace evidence in her own house?
But it was revealed that she painted her basement white to cover up the crime scene and erase all evidence. But somehow, it didn't work. Over the years, the case was tried 4 separate times. 2 juries couldn't reach a verdict. 1 conviction was overturned. And each time, both families were forced to relive the heartbreak all over again. Finally, in early 2023, a Hampshire County jury reached a unanimous verdict that Cara Rintala was guilty of voluntary manslaughter in connection with Anna Marie's death. The decision came after years of uncertainty, giving way to one last, emotional day in court. Her sentencing. While no clear motive was agreed upon in court, prosecutors painted the crime as a result of a heated argument between the couple that turned fatal. The judge, however, made it clear that no matter the reason, Anna Marie's death was Cara's responsibility, and the pain rippling through their daughter's life was a direct result of that night. In a Northampton courtroom, after hearing from both families, including the couple's now 16-year-old daughter Brianna, who tearfully begged for her mother's release, Judge Francis Flannery sentenced Cara to 12 to 14 years in prison, taking into account the 7.5 years she had already served. As the verdict was read, Cara broke down, sobbing in the courtroom.
Give the defendant a sentence of no less than 12 and no more than 14 years.
It was a bittersweet moment. Anna Marie's family said the sentence could never truly heal their loss, but it brought a measure of justice they had waited more than a decade to see. For Brianna, it was another painful goodbye to the only mother she remembered. She said tearfully in the courtroom,
I cannot live without my mom. I need her. Having my mom back home means the world to me. And I am asking you to release my mom right away and let her live with me for good.
Years of courtroom battles and heartbreak couldn't undo one fatal night. Our next case takes you to a reckless choice that killed 2 young lives and the careless tweet that sealed their fate.
If I could
take my life and I would bring Caitlin and Marissa back, I would do that in a second.
The moment that shocked an entire community came just hours after a careless tweet. Too drunk to care. On November 17, 2013, Kayla Mendoza drove drunk the wrong way on a highway, causing a crash that took 2 young women's lives. What happened next would change everything, and you won't believe the message she sent before it all went wrong. Kayla was not only drunk, but also driving the wrong way on the Sawgrass Expressway at around 80 miles per hour. The crash happened just after 1:45 in the morning, and it was deadly. Caitlin Ferranti and Marissa Catranillo, both 21 years old, were in the other car. Marissa died instantly, and Caitlin passed away days later in the hospital. When police investigated, they found Kayla's alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. She wasn't licensed to drive either. Kayla had been drinking at a local bar called Tijuana Taxico earlier that night. Her social media post showed a troubling pattern. She openly admitted to using substances, even calling herself a pothead princess and tweeting about being too drunk to care. The crash destroyed lives and shattered families. Kayla herself was seriously injured, breaking both legs and spending over a year in a wheelchair. But the biggest tragedy was the loss of Caitlin and Marissa. Kayla's reckless behavior that night came from ignoring the dangers of drunk driving. Her careless attitude was clear from her tweets and actions, showing a dangerous mix of substance mistreatment and poor choices. In 2015, after pleading guilty on 2 counts of DUI manslaughter, Kayla was sentenced to 24 years in prison. On top of that, she'll serve 6 years of probation and is permanently banned from driving. As the verdict was announced, she apologized to the family members of the victims. She said,
I just want to tell you how sorry I am.
The families of the victims fought hard for justice, even filing lawsuits against Kayla and others connected to the night of the crash. Marissa's parents started Marissa's Way, a foundation to educate young people about the dangers of drunk driving. Her aunt said in court that her mother visited her grave and that her daughter had told her this.
Mom, please don't leave me here. And always I turn back to blow her a kiss and tell her how sorry I am that I couldn't protect her that night.
2 lives gone, 1 driver who didn't care. However, our next case illustrates how fear can transform a tragedy into a cold act of running from responsibility.
I don't know John well, but that doesn't make my regret any less. Amy and Chris shouldn't have to feel the pain of the loss of their son because of my actions.
In court, the truth hit like a punch. 20-year-old Cole Thompson died in a fiery crash just a day before his 21st birthday, and the driver who could have helped him ran instead. 1 reckless night, 1 shocking choice, and now 19-year-old Mackenzie Laney faces years behind bars. On a March night in 2024, tragedy struck the streets of Minneapolis, leaving 1 young man dead by Easter morning and another fighting for his life. Just after midnight on March 31st, Laney was driving with friends on Hiawatha Avenue. According to investigators, she was speeding and driving aggressively. Moments later, the car veered out of control and slammed into a tree. The impact was so severe that it caused the vehicle to burst into flames. Inside were her 2 passengers, one of them, 20-year-old Cole Thompson, who would not survive. When police and firefighters arrived, they found a horrifying scene of flames consuming the wreck, and Cole lying in the road with no chance of survival. Another passenger stood nearby, badly hurt with burns, broken ribs, and a concussion, but the driver was gone. Witnesses and evidence revealed that Laney and another passenger had fled on foot before help could arrive. Cole's mother, Amy Lorenzen, spoke in court, her words cutting through the silence. She said Laney had a chance to call an emergency.
She had the opportunity to show a shred of humanity, to take responsibility in the moment, to call 911 and possibly save my son's life. But she chose to run.
That decision, Amy said, stole precious minutes that might have saved Cole. While there was no grand scheme or hidden plot, the motive in this case was rooted in reckless behavior, a disregard for safety, speed limits, and the lives in her care. The decision to flee was driven by fear, but it turned a tragic crash into something even more unforgivable. Laney was charged with criminal vehicular homicide for leaving the scene of a crash that caused a death, and criminal vehicular operation for causing great bodily harm and fleeing. In court, she was sentenced to 4 years in prison, followed by 16 months of supervised release. At the time of sentencing, she showed regret for her actions and tearfully said,
I miss him every day. Same as I carry the guilt of this every day.
For Cole's family, no prison term can replace the life lost or undo the pain caused. The crash didn't just claim a life, it took away a son. The victim's mother said,
She abandoned them in a burning car. She left them there, dying, without calling for help. No parent should ever have to bury their child. And yet here I am, before you, pleading for justice for my son.
A fiery crash, a mother's pain, and a driver who ran from the flames. Our next case takes you to a wife's dark secret, mercy masking crime, a hospital hostage, and a deadly promise that shook all.
For 2 years, I've been preparing myself mentally and emotionally to spend the rest of my life in prison.
The moment Ellen Gilland took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She looked straight ahead and calmly admitted,
I held the gun behind his ear. I pulled it away and asked him if he was sure. He raised his hand and placed it on my arm and pushed the gun to his head.
What she described next would reveal how a hospital room turned into the scene of a deadly promise, and why this 76-year-old wife was now facing prison time. Ellen's husband had been battling a terminal illness. The couple had been together for decades, and according to Ellen, they had talked about ending his suffering. But what began as a heartbreaking conversation between two people in love turned into an act that stunned everyone around them. That morning, Ellen brought a gun to the hospital. She later told the court she asked her husband one last time if this was what he truly wanted. She said he raised his hand, touched her arm, and pushed the gun toward his head. Moments later, a single gunshot echoed through the hospital as Ellen pulled the trigger, killing Jerry. Staff rushed to the scene, but they couldn't save him. The situation escalated quickly. Ellen barricaded herself in the room for hours, refusing to let anyone in and even threatening to shoot if someone tried. SWAT teams and negotiators worked to calm the situation before eventually taking her into custody without further conflict. Her arrest made headlines nationwide. While some saw her as a loving wife, honoring her husband's final wish, others saw a dangerous act that traumatized hospital workers and responding officers. Ellen insisted it was mercy, that she did it out of love and compassion. Prosecutors, however, argued that no matter the motive, bringing a loaded gun into a hospital, killing someone, and threatening others could not be excused. They said the defendant entered the hospital with a loaded gun, and after killing her husband, the defendant then pointed her firearm at a nurse at security, and then at police. In court, Ellen pleaded no contest. Judge Catherine Weston acknowledged the emotional weight of the case, but also recognized the trauma suffered by the nursing staff and law enforcement that day. Ellen was sentenced to just under a year in prison, far less than the 10 years she could have faced. Her defense attorney thanked the judge for showing compassion, expressing that while they had hoped for probation, they were relieved the sentence wasn't more severe. As Ellen was led away to begin her sentence, she stayed calm and composed. Some hospital staff members said,
The staff came running in clearly very agitated, saying this is not a drill.
Next up, she claimed it was a horrible accident, but prosecutors said Linda Sturmer used fire to cover up murder.
Members of the jury, listen to your verdict as recorded. In regards to count 1, guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
In a quiet Michigan town back in 2007, what started as an ordinary Sunday took a tragic turn. A man was left fighting for his life after a horrific blaze. Despite efforts to save him, he sadly passed away. Shockingly, the person accused of being involved was someone close to him, his wife, Linda Sturmer. According to prosecutors, it all began with a heated argument. Todd had reportedly discovered that Linda was involved in a relationship outside their marriage. What followed, they claimed, was a deeply troubling series of events. Linda was accused of setting a fire during the confrontation, and in the chaos that followed, running over Todd with a vehicle. Linda claimed it was all an accident, saying that candles and an oil lamp had started the fire, but the story didn't add up. Investigators dug deep. The fire scene, the evidence on Linda's clothes, and witness statements all painted a darker picture. The case went to trial, and in 2010, Linda was convicted of murder. But a twist came in 2020 when she won an appeal. A federal court ruled that her defense lawyer didn't do enough to challenge the prosecution's arson theory. She was released and granted a new trial. Still, doubts remained. One judge even said the case was so clear-cut that all that was missing was a film of the killing.
The new house that they built on County Road 215.
I'm hearing pretty good here.
The retrial in 2025 was Linda's second chance. But this time, the jury wasn't swayed by her claims of innocence. The evidence was overwhelming. The injuries Todd suffered, the gasoline traces, and the condition of the van all told a chilling story. At the heart of it all was a broken marriage, one filled with betrayal and tension. The day before the killing, Todd had discovered Linda's affair. Prosecutors believed that was the final trigger, and instead of ending the marriage peacefully, Linda chose atrocity.
Prosecutors say she set her husband on fire in January of 2007 after dousing him in gasoline, then ran him over with the family van after he escaped the home.
On May 20th, 2025, a Van Buren County judge sentenced Linda Sturmer to life in prison without the eligibility of parole. She became emotional as the verdict was read. This time, there would be no appeal, no second chance. The judge called the killing more gruesome than most and said she couldn't even imagine the pain Todd went through before he died. In court, Linda still claimed she was innocent. She said she was wrongfully convicted and was ready to fight ahead. But the courtroom remained quiet with no gasps and no sympathy, because this time, no one believed her. Our next case is pure evil, involving a woman who didn't just kill, but planned every step, even dragging the body herself.
Like I said, what we have to do right now at this point is identify the person that was found.
I don't.
You don't want to look at him?
No.
Okay.
I'm really afraid.
In Claremont County, Ohio, the summer of 2019 turned tragic when 42-year-old Jason Hamrick was found dead. His body had been dragged and left a mile from his home. He was a respected member of the U.S. Air Force, a father of 3, and someone who believed in giving people second chances. The person behind his death was his estranged wife, Angelina Hamrick. Jason and Angelina were going through a rough patch. Their marriage had fallen apart, and there was a tense custody dispute over their 3 sons. Even though they had separated, Jason allowed Angelina to move back in after she claimed she had nowhere else to go. Less than a month later, Jason was dead.
His body was found in a ditch last Sunday, just a mile down the road from the home.
On June 30th, 2019, police discovered Jason's body not far from his home. There were clear signs he had been dragged, deliberately moved to hide the crime. What followed was a deep and disturbing investigation. Prosecutors uncovered that Angelina had not acted on impulse. She had planned Jason's killing for months with the help of her lover, Michael Clark. They reportedly practiced dragging a man's body. Angelina even fired a test shot out of her son's bedroom window to see if neighbors would call the police. She and Clark also made repeated calls to Jason's employer and the authorities to try to ruin his reputation. On the night Jason died, there was no argument and no physical fight. He was simply lying on the couch. That was when Angelina pulled the trigger. The prosecution described it as a cold-blooded execution with no remorse and no hesitation. The reason behind this chilling crime was control. Prosecutors believed Angelina wanted full custody of the kids and a life free from Jason. With Clark encouraging her, they believed removing Jason was the only way forward. It was not about passion, it was about power.
Days away from a pretrial hearing in her more than year-long divorce from Jason when prosecutors say she shot him once in the head.
In 2023, Angelina Hamrick was sentenced to life in prison. She will not be eligible for parole for 30 years. The judge called her a danger to society. The assistant prosecutor said she showed no emotion and no regret for Jason or for her children. Though her lawyer claimed she struggled with isolation and adjusting to life in America, the jury did not accept her defense. Jason's death did not just end a life, it shattered a family. His children lost both parents, one to death and one to a prison cell. What makes this story so heartbreaking is not just the crime, it's the fact that Jason offered to help and opened his home, only to be betrayed. Our next case reveals a chilling crime fueled by cold, calculated greed.
I see is, I saw the hammer go into Dale's head.
Back in 2009, in a seemingly peaceful Arizona suburb, a horrifying crime unfolded inside the home of Dale Harrell and his wife, Marissa DeVault. From the outside, their life looked normal. They had kids, a house, and what seemed like a typical marriage. But behind closed doors, something disturbing was building up. What happened inside that home would leave investigators stunned. One night, 31-year-old Marissa DeVault attacked her husband, Dale Harrell, with a claw hammer. She hit him in the head multiple times with brutal force. The injuries were so severe that Dale, only 34 years old, later died in the hospital. Marissa claimed she acted in self-defense. She told police that Dale had mistreated her for years. Her children even said they had seen him hit her. But investigators soon realized there was more to the story. As detectives looked deeper, Marissa's story began to fall apart. She changed her version of events several times. First, she said Dale attacked her. Then she said she could not remember. These inconsistencies made detectives suspicious. They also found out Marissa was drowning in debt. She owed thousands of dollars and had a hidden relationship with another man. Additionally, she had taken out a large life insurance policy on Dale. That discovery changed everything. By 2014, the case went to trial. Prosecutors laid out their argument. They said Marissa did not act out of fear, but out of greed. With Dale gone, she could collect the insurance money, pay off her debts, and start a new life. The defense argued that she was a longtime victim of mistreatment and the killing was not planned. But the jury found her shifting stories and secret motives too hard to ignore.
These three young girls that their mother probably didn't get a death sentence.
All signs pointed to a carefully planned killing. The financial struggles, the affair, and the life insurance policy painted a picture of someone desperate and deceptive. Marissa had many ways to walk away from the situation. Instead, she chose conflict.
Over being spared the death penalty, the convicted killer smiled.
On April 8, 2014, the jury found Marissa DeVault guilty of first-degree murder. Prosecutors pushed for the death penalty, but the jury was moved by her children's emotional testimony about the mistreatment. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. However, she remained stone-faced and smiled when the verdict was read. Judge Roland Steinley made it final. Marissa would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Marissa watched everything silently. Some in the courtroom saw a broken woman. Others believed she was manipulative from the start. But what no one could deny was the pain left behind. 3 children had lost both of their parents, one to murder, the other to a prison sentence. Our next case explores how setting a fire as a prank ended up killing 4 innocent people.
Repeatedly, these are the hands that are responsible for Beth's death. I was telling her, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. So it was emotional on both our parts.
In Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a chilling crime from over 2 decades ago still haunts the community. In 2002, Janet Danahy sparked a deadly fire at a Greensboro apartment complex, a fire that claimed the lives of 4 young people and left a trail of heartbreak and unanswered questions. Janet said the fire was supposed to be a prank on her ex-boyfriend. But what started on a couch outside the Campus Walk Apartments near UNC Greensboro quickly turned deadly. The flames spread fast, trapping and killing Ryan Beck, Elizabeth Harris, and sisters Rachel and Donna Llewellyn. Authorities launched a full investigation and soon found Janet responsible. She was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder. The evidence made it clear the fire was no accident. It was set on purpose, and the purpose shocked everyone in the community.
2 rounds of successful commutation.
She had only planned to set fire to some Christmas decorations as a Valentine's Day prank, but things went wrong. The fire spread quickly, collapsing staircases and trapping sleeping tenants inside, which resulted in the deaths of 4 people. Janet Danahy was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. The victims' families faced a heartbreaking loss, and justice seemed to be served. But then, things took an unexpected turn.
Chance is well deserved.
The thing I can't help but recognize is that we were initially facing the death penalty.
Earlier in 2023, Janet became eligible for parole and could have been released as early as New Year's Day. However, her request was denied, and she will remain in prison to serve out her life sentence. She showed no remorse for her actions. This case shows how one reckless decision can destroy many lives. The pain from that tragic night still lives on for the victims' families. They hold on to hope that justice will stay strong and that their loved ones will never be forgotten. Our next case is a pure nightmare when someone refuses to learn from past deadly mistakes.
Any sorries I say to each of you, or even him, I could never forgive myself.
On a busy stretch of Florida's Interstate 4 in April 2021, a tragic crash took place that would change many lives forever. Jennifer Carvajal, driving at a dangerous speed, lost control of her car. The crash killed her 22-year-old cousin and left other passengers seriously injured. Jennifer wasn't just any driver that night. She was speeding at 110 miles per hour, lost control, and her car went airborne before crashing into a fence, a parked truck, a concrete pole, and a tree. The impact was devastating, causing the death of her cousin and severe injuries to others in the vehicle. When police arrived, they quickly learned that this was not Jennifer's first time behind the wheel under the influence. She was already on probation for a previous deadly DUI crash back in 2014, when she was just 16 years old. That earlier crash had also caused a fatality, leading to a 5-year prison sentence. Despite her past, Jennifer was again driving drunk, risking her life and others.
Killed someone while driving drunk. She spent 5 years in prison following a deadly DUI accident in 2014 when she was 16 years old.
After pleading guilty to DUI manslaughter and vehicular homicide in February 2025, she faced sentencing. The courtroom was filled with family members and victims' loved ones, all waiting for justice. The motive behind this tragic pattern was reckless behavior and poor choices behind the wheel, even after multiple warnings and consequences. On Friday, May 30th, 2025, Jennifer Carvajal was sentenced to more than 60 years in prison. However, she showed a little bit of regret for her actions. Prosecutors pointed out that she had been given many chances, but continued to show she was a danger to the community. Jennifer has been sentenced, but the pain of losing a loved one and the injuries suffered by others remain. This sentence sends a strong message about the serious consequences of driving under the influence, especially when lives are at risk.
She stands convicted again of killing a young woman while her small children slept in nearby beds.
On May 28, 1981, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a quiet neighborhood was shaken by the killing of a young mother. Christine Schultz, a nurse and mother of 2, was found bound, gagged, and shot inside her own home. Her sons were asleep in the next room. The community was shocked, but what came as an even greater surprise was the identity of the main suspect, 22-year-old Lori Bembenek, a former police officer and the new wife of Christine's ex-husband. Lori's story captured national attention, led to public debates, inspired books and movies, and eventually earned her the nickname Bambi. Lori had trained at the Milwaukee Police Academy and briefly served as a patrol officer. However, her career was cut short after a scandal involving another officer, and she was fired. Later, she married Fred Schultz, a veteran officer who had 2 sons from his previous marriage to Christine Schultz. Lori quickly stepped into the role of stepmother. Just months into her marriage, tragedy struck. Christine was killed in her home in a horrifying attack. She had been tied up and shot through the heart. One of her sons described seeing a masked figure with a reddish ponytail leaving the house. While the witness believed the intruder was a man, the investigation soon focused on Lori instead. Detectives discovered that the killing weapon was Fred Schultz's off-duty revolver, which had been kept in the apartment he shared with Lori. Lori also had access to a copy of the key to Christine's house. There was no sign of forced entry. Witnesses said Lori had previously made comments suggesting she wanted Christine gone. Police found a wig in the plumbing system of her apartment that matched fibers discovered at the crime scene. A green jogging suit, a clothesline, and a blue bandana, all similar to the items used during the killing, were also linked to her. Even though Christine's son had described the killer as a man, Lori was arrested. The trial quickly became a media sensation. Prosecutors painted Lori as a jealous woman who wanted her husband's ex-wife out of their lives forever. On March 9, 1982, Lori Bembenek was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, but the case did not end there. It took an unexpected twist years later. In 1990, Lori escaped from Tachita Correctional Institution with help from her new fiancé. The two fled across the border and were eventually found in Canada after more than 3 months on the run. The press had a field day. Headlines around the country read "Run, Bambi, run," and the case gained even more fame. Prosecutors argued that Lori's motive was simple. They claimed she wanted financial freedom. With Christine gone, Lori and Fred would no longer need to deal with child support or alimony. They said she wanted to take Christine's place completely, but Lori continued to maintain her innocence. Over time, new evidence raised questions about the original investigation. Male DNA was discovered at the scene. Ballistics tests did not match Fred's gun, and even the hair samples presented during the trial were later disputed.
Lori Bembenek has not slowed down the controversy over whether she was guilty or innocent of murdering her husband's ex-wife.
Some believed Lori had been framed. Others suspected that someone else had been involved, even someone hired to commit the killing. Doubts began to grow about whether justice had truly been served. In 1992, after spending nearly 11 years behind bars, Lori accepted a plea deal. However, she showed no emotion during her sentencing. She entered a no-contest plea to second-degree murder in exchange for time already served and was placed on probation for 10 years. She walked free, but never stopped trying to clear her name. Her attempts to appeal were consistently denied, mostly because of that no-contest plea. Still, Lori pushed forward, pointing to inconsistencies in the evidence and testimonies that changed over time. She eventually moved to Washington, married again, and tried to live a normal life. But her health continued to decline. She suffered from post-traumatic stress, battled alcoholism, and later lost part of her leg after a serious fall. On November 20th, 2010, Lori Bembenek passed away at the age of 52. Lori Bembenek's story continues to haunt and divide. Some believe she was a cold-blooded killer, while others see her as a woman wrongly convicted by a flawed system. Many wonder if she took the fall for someone else's crime. The full truth may never be known, but one thing is certain. Her case permanently changed public perception of justice and the media. Our next case reveals how a single shot shattered a promising future.
Delta 310, reminder they're armed. Good public felony.
In 2013, in Dallas, Texas, a former police officer made a tragic mistake that changed a young man's life forever. Amy Wilburn, once a Dallas police officer, shot an innocent man who had his hands raised. In 2013, Kelvin Walker was sitting in the front seat of a stolen car. He didn't know the car was stolen and was not involved in any crime. When police arrived, Kelvin raised his hands to show he was not a threat. Despite this, Amy Wilburn fired her gun and shot him. After the shooting, the Dallas Police Department investigated the incident. Wilburn said she could not see Kelvin's right hand and thought she was in danger. But an independent witness confirmed Kelvin had his hands up. Because of her actions, Amy Wilburn was fired from the police force. Amy Wilburn pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of discharging a firearm within a city. She gave up her peace officer's license and was sentenced to 18 months of deferred adjudication, which means she avoided jail time, but had to follow court orders.
Turned me up on the inside. Every day I look at my scars. Every day I wake up to a bullet that's still in me.
The shooting wasn't driven by anger, but stemmed from fear and poor judgment in a high-pressure moment. Still, the harm done to Kelvin was very real and life-altering. Despite this, Wilburn showed no remorse and maintained a cold demeanor during sentencing. Kelvin Walker spoke in court about how the shooting changed his life. Once a star athlete and starting quarterback, he said, "Now I can't run. I can't jump. I can't do anything." He has also filed a civil rights lawsuit against Amy Wilburn and the city of Dallas, with a trial planned soon. For almost 5 years, Kelvin lived with the pain and struggled from that day. In court, he said, "It's been hurting me and killing me." When he saw Amy Wilburn again in court, she said nothing as she left. Our next case is full of jealousy and deception, where a police officer crossed the line with a deadly plan.
Who, according to the FBI, went out and tried to hire a hitman in order to kill her estranged husband and the daughter.
On a quiet morning in May 2019, officers arrived at the Suffolk County home of Valerie Cincinnati, a New York police officer with 5 years of service. They had devastating news to deliver. Her estranged husband, Isaiah Carvalho, had just been found dead. Valerie broke down on the spot, appearing shocked and overwhelmed. Based on the information the press could get their hands on, the scene looked like a tragic end to a rocky marriage. But behind that grief was a far darker truth. Just days earlier, federal agents were tipped off about a disturbing murder-for-hire plot allegedly orchestrated by Valerie herself. While still serving as an NYPD officer, she had reached out to her boyfriend, John DeRuba, and asked him to find a hitman. The target was her husband Isaiah. But what truly shocked investigators was that Valerie also allegedly wanted another person dead, DeRuba's 13-year-old daughter. She reportedly hated the teen and was jealous of the expensive gifts John was buying her. Instead of going along with the plan, John went straight to the FBI. The FBI acted fast. They launched a sting operation to catch Valerie in the act. First, they convinced Isaiah to play dead. He recalled how agents placed shattered glass around the passenger seat and told him to slump over, as if he had been shot. Then they took a fake crime scene photo and used it to trick Valerie into believing her plan had succeeded. Agents showed up at her door with grim expressions and broke the news. Her reaction was caught on video. She seemed shocked, even heartbroken, but prosecutors said it was all a fake. They had wiretaps, text messages, and secret recordings proving Valerie had planned the whole thing. The moment everything unraveled came when Valerie, thinking she was in the clear, told John to erase any evidence. "Delete my effing texts. You're not keeping anything on this effing phone."
Delete my text. You're not keeping anything on this phone.
That was when the FBI moved in and made the arrest. Investigators believed Valerie was driven by jealousy and control. Her marriage was crumbling, and her relationship with John was full of tension. She allegedly couldn't stand the attention and money John gave to his daughter. Prosecutors said she was willing to kill both her husband and a teenage girl just to get her way. Valerie was arrested and charged in federal court, while the murder-for-hire charges were dropped as a part of a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. In 2021, she was sentenced to 48 months in prison. She was suspended from the NYPD without pay and later resigned from the force. Deruba was not charged. For Isaiah Carvalho, the entire ordeal left deep scars. He now lives with constant fear, always looking over his shoulder. "I thought I married someone who swore to protect and serve," he said in an interview. "Instead, I got someone who tried to have me killed." Even today, the memory of pretending to be dead in the car, surrounded by broken glass, still haunts him. Our next case is a devastating nightmare. A split-second mistake that cost a young life forever.
I grabbed the wrong gun! I shot him! Oh my God! Oh my God!
On a Sunday afternoon, April 11th, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, 20-year-old Dante Wright was driving with his girlfriend when his car was pulled over by the police. What began as a routine traffic stop ended in tragedy and sent shockwaves across the country. Dante Wright, a young black father, was stopped for minor traffic violations. As officers checked his ID, they discovered he had an outstanding warrant. When they attempted to arrest him, the situation quickly escalated. In the middle of the struggle, Officer Kimberly Potter pulled out her gun, mistaking it for her taser, and fired one shot. Dante was struck in the chest. He drove a short distance before crashing. Paramedics tried to save him, but it was too late. Dante Wright died at the scene. The next day, body cam footage was released. It showed Potter shouting, "Taser, taser, taser," just before pulling the trigger. Her reaction was immediate. She realized she had fired her handgun instead. The video confirmed the tragic mistake.
Tase him! Taser, taser, taser! Ah, he shot me. Oh, shit!
In the following days, both Kimberly Potter and the police chief resigned from their positions. Protests erupted across Minnesota and the country. Dante's death reopened painful wounds, especially with the George Floyd trial happening just miles away. As public pressure mounted, Potter was arrested and charged with manslaughter. Prosecutors argued that she had years of training and should have known the difference between a bright yellow taser and a black handgun. The case went to trial, and the courtroom was heavy with emotion. Potter took the stand and tearfully admitted her mistake, but Dante's family, especially his mother, found no comfort in her words. This was not a premeditated act, it was a deadly error. Potter said she was under stress and confused at the moment, but her mistake ended her life. Dante Wright would never return home to his family or raise his young son. On December 23, 2021, Kimberly Potter was found guilty of both first and second-degree manslaughter. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and served just 16 months. When the verdict was read, she tearfully apologized for her actions. Many felt the punishment did not reflect the gravity of the loss. Dante's family reached a $3.25 million settlement with the city. His name became another symbol in a national conversation about police use of force and injustice. Dante's mother said she could never forgive Potter for what had been taken from them. Our next case reveals a robbery carried out by a former officer that left an entire neighborhood stunned.
Former New Orleans police officer who killed 3 people back in the 90s during a shocking crime.
In 1995, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Antoinette Frank, a former New Orleans police officer, was involved in a deadly robbery at a local restaurant. 3 people were killed, including a fellow officer. The case shocked the community and led to a long investigation. The tragedy happened at the Kim On restaurant, where both Antoinette Frank and Officer Ronald Williams II worked extra shifts as security guards. That night, the robbery turned deadly. Frank and an accomplice opened fire, killing Officer Williams along with Ha Vu and Quang Vu. After the shooting, Frank left the restaurant but returned later pretending to bring help. However, members of the Vu family who had hidden inside a large cooler recognized her when she came back. Their eyewitness accounts helped investigators connect her to the crime. Frank's accomplice was also arrested and is now serving a life sentence. Antoinette Frank was eventually sentenced to death for killing. However, when the verdict was announced, she walked out of the courtroom with a blank, expressionless face. But in 2025, she requested clemency from the Louisiana Pardon Board, asking to have her sentence reduced. After emotional testimony from both supporters and victims' families, the board's vote ended in a tie. With a 2-2 vote, her request was officially denied. While the motive behind the crime was believed to be robbery,
Frank is trying to avoid the death sentence handed down after her conviction in a 1995 triple murder.
Frank's supporters pointed to her deeply painful past. She had suffered years of mistreatment as a child, including repeated assault by her father and being forced into a termination of pregnancy. Despite this, the board focused on her conduct in prison and concerns about public safety if her sentence was changed. Governor John Bell Edwards had voiced strong opposition to the death penalty and supported clemency hearings for many death row inmates, including Frank. But due to political blocs and the board's split decision, her sentence remains unchanged. Antoinette Frank is still on death row with no chance of parole. The families of the victims, especially Officer Williams' son, strongly opposed any eligibility for leniency. This case continues to raise difficult questions about justice, accountability, and forgiveness. While Frank's past is tragic, the suffering she caused can never be erased. It is a painful reminder that one decision, one act of conflict, can destroy multiple lives and leave lasting scars on everyone involved. The actions of these female killers shattered lives, destroyed families, and left wounds that may never heal. And in the courtroom, their chilling lack of remorse stood in stark contrast to the heartbreak of those left behind.